type of account called a 529 plan account or a college savings plan account, which allows individuals to save money in a tax-advantaged manner for college education. So the ABLE Act was modeled on that type of account, and instead of being used for college expenses, it is designed to allow individuals with the disabilities to save money in a tax-free savings account and use the money in those accounts for what are called qualified disability expenses, while not affecting your eligibility, the individual's eligibility for means-tested programs. Legislation was passed nationally, but each state is required to pass its own legislation as well, and it's been enacted in last count 40 out of the 50 states, including Texas. In order to be eligible to open or have an ABLE account, the disability or blindness onset had to be prior to the age of 26. You can be older than 26 when opening the account, as long as the individual was disability or that has the disability occurred prior to the age of 26. If the age criteria is met and an individual is already receiving SSI or SSDI, then they're automatically eligible to open an account. If the individual is not receiving SSI or SSDI, then they must just simply meet Social Security's definition of significant functional limitations and receive a letter certifying that they're disabled from a licensed physician. So ABLE accounts do have limits on the amount of money that can be put into them. You can put up to $15,000 into an ABLE account each year, and the source of those funds can come from many different places. So it could be parents, grandparents, relatives, it could be the individual with the disability, but the total combined amount that you can contribute to an account in any given calendar year is $15,000 total. The maximum amount is dependent upon the state, but it's usually fairly significant. In Texas, I believe the amount is somewhere around $329,000 is the maximum that can be in an account. It is important to know that the balance of an ABLE account is excluded from means testing for Social Security supplemental income and for other programs up to $100,000. So if the SSI recipient's ABLE account goes over $100,000, the benefits can be, SSI benefits can be suspended until the account balance falls back below 100,000. So if I have $95,000 in an account and I add 15,000 to it, get up to 110,000, then my SSI, if I was eligible for SSI, would be suspended until it was spent or until I withdrew the balance back down below 100. Medicaid eligibility is not affected by that quirk. Only one ABLE account is allowed per person, so you can't have multiple ABLE accounts at multiple different companies. I don't know why you would want to. And as I said earlier, contributions can be made by anyone, and they must be made in cash. And so it can be the beneficiary, which is the person with the disability, but can also be family members, friends, really anyone can put money into the account as long as you don't exceed the $15,000 per year. ABLE accounts, as I mentioned earlier, grow tax-free. So typically the money is either in a interest type of account or some sort of investment, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, and it is growing, and that growth is tax-free. So any other asset, if I was to buy something and sell it for more than I bought it for, typically those gains are going to be taxable. But if the money is inside a ABLE account and invested in stock market or earning interest and growing, that growth is tax-free. There are no taxes due on that money, as long as the distributions are used for what's called a qualified disability expense. And those qualified disability expenses can be things like education, housing, transportation, employment training, health, legal fees, funeral and burial, and basic living expenses. So think of it as day-to-day expenses or necessary expenses for living. Trip to Vegas or Hawaii or something that is not necessary would not be deemed a qualified disability expense, but think of it as very basic things that you sort of need on a daily basis, like housing, transportation, medical care, things like that. The account is managed or can be managed by what's called the beneficiary. The beneficiary is the person with the disability, and or it can also be managed by what's called an authorized representative. So if the person with the disability is not able to manage their own finances, the account can have an authorized representative. That could be a person that is a legal guardian or a person with a power of attorney, but that person has to have the ability or the right to manage the person's finances. Also, if the beneficiary is a minor, it could be the parent, which in that case is the legal guardian. There is a clause that does say if in the law that says if the beneficiary passes away and there is money in the ABLE account, it does require a Medicaid payback, which is a reimbursement to the state upon the beneficiary's passing. So for example, in Texas, if I set up an ABLE account for my son, which I have, Medicaid, if he was to pass away, Medicaid could take money out of the ABLE account to reimburse Medicaid for any expenses that they paid for on his behalf during his lifetime. And that includes, that includes third-party contributions, so it doesn't matter where the money came from after the account was created. States, like I said earlier, states have to adopt ABLE, and it has been adopted in over 40 states as of the last time I checked. And Texas does have a program. Every state has different features for their programs. Just as an example, some states allow their program to have a debit card, others don't. States have different fees, different characteristics to their programs, so it's often a good idea to shop around, because you can use you do not have to use the program. It sounds a little strange, but you do not have to use the program of the state that you're in. So you could reside in Texas, and it sounds funny, but you could reside in Texas and use the program of the state of Delaware if you wanted to, or Virginia. So if Virginia had a better set of features that you like better than the state of Texas's program, you're perfectly capable or perfectly able to use Virginia's program as well. That's not, every state is not like that. Some states require you to live there to use their program, but many of them do not. So it's pretty common that folks who live in Texas, if they don't like their program, they might use the one for the state of Oklahoma or vice versa. And that doesn't limit where you can spend the money. The money can be spent anywhere. It's just they're established on a state-by-state basis. It is kind of strange, but each state determines the enrollment process. And like I said, every state is different. There may be, different minimum contributions to open the account, as well as different maintenance fees. So it's important, I think, to shop for the least costly, best features when you're looking around at the different state programs. A very good resource to compare programs on a state-by-state basis is ablenrc.org, so ablenrc.org. This is a very good website in terms of information on the Act, and covers different states and has links to the different state programs, so you can sort of compare them and contrast them. So things to consider with an ABLE account. An ABLE account may not be the best vehicle for large sums of money. There is a limit of $15,000 per year that can be contributed to the account. So a $50,000 settlement or something of that nature, just to use random numbers, would exceed the maximum annual contribution limit. If the beneficiary who incurs a disability is older than age 26, they would not be eligible to open an ABLE account. There is legislation in Congress to change that. There was a event just late last year that highlighted some individuals that had served in the military and were injured after the age of 26. It was attended by several senators, and so there's some efforts being underway to try to get that changed. But currently, you have to open an account, you have to have been disabled or blind prior to the age of 26. And hopefully that legislation does get changed. They're currently trying to raise it to 46. The beneficiary, which is the person with a disability, cannot make financial decisions. There needs to be a authorized representative on the account. If the beneficiary is capable of making financial decisions, that beneficiary and authorized representative can basically be the same person. If there is an authorized representative on the account, though, that person has to have a power of attorney or guardianship over the financial aspects of the beneficiary's estate. Of course, another tool may be a special needs trust. A special needs trust is slightly different. It stipulates how the monies contributed to the trust are dispersed for the beneficiary. Typically involves enlisting an attorney's help to draw up the trust. The trust typically, or the document that sets up the trust would typically name a trustee who is responsible to carry out the terms of the trust, and the trustee is obligated to act in accordance with the trust. And so a special needs trust is typically a more complex vehicle, maybe a little more difficult and expensive to set up than an ABLE account. And as you may or may not know, typically used for very different things. Supplemental special needs trusts are typically used for supplemental needs. You cannot typically take a distribution from a special needs trust for living expenses, eating. These are the things that are supposed to be covered by SSI, but as we all know, SSI doesn't provide a very significant benefit. And so a ABLE account, unlike a special needs trust, can be used to supplement those benefits, whereas a special needs trust, the money typically can't be used for the same types of things. And so I'll skip over this, but this is just some things to think about, not necessarily MassMutual, but any financial planner in general can help, I think, understand the financial needs of the individual, provide a financial needs analysis, and coordinate strategies with advisors and other professionals, and coordinate with an attorney and other professionals to ensure that benefits such as Medicaid or SSI won't be jeopardized. So I think it's important to have someone, on your team that can provide advice in that regard. So that is the basic overview of how ABLE accounts work. I'm happy to, at this point,